Alright guys, we're going to continue on of solving linear systems. So we talked about this the previous lesson. There are certain steps that you have to follow when solving systems, and your first step is to define your variables. Our second step is to write the equations. And then pick a method to solve. Remember, we've got 3 different methods. We've got graphing, substitution, and elimination. So the best way to figure out which way you need to solve it is kind of looking at what information is given to you. So if you want to solve it by graphing, then you definitely want a visual display of what you have. You want a visual display of the equation so you can estimate that solution given that coordinate plane. But for substitution, that is when one equation is already solved for one of the variables. And keep in mind, it could be both of the equations too. You want at least one of them to be solved. And then elimination, that's when the coefficient of one variable are the same or opposite. Okay, so those are the main things that we need to focus on when solving these types of problems. But if we look at example number 1, we've got a fashion designer sells and makes scarves. The material for each scarf costs $5.50. The scarf sells for $12.50 each, and the designer spends $1,400 on advertising. So how many scarves must the designer sell to break even? So our first step that we need to do is define those variables. So one big thing that we have is we want to figure out how many scarves, so we can just say that's S, the number of scarves she needs to sell, I forgot my R, to break even. And then our second variable is going to be the cost. How much money she's either going to make or break even with. So our next step is to write the system of equations. So there's 2 different types of information here. There's how much it's going to cost her and how much it's going to cost someone who purchases a scarf. So if we start with how much it's going to cost for someone to purchase this scarf, we can see that information right here. The scarves sell for $12.50 each. So that cost, that's an income to her, is $12.50 per scarf. So that's S. There's that rate of change. Our second equation is how much it costs her. So the material for each scarf costs $5.50 each, and then the designer spends $1,400 on one-time advertising. So we would write that our cost would equal that $5.50 per scarf, and then that one-time cost of $1,400. Okay, so there's our 2 equations, and we need to figure out which method is the best for solving. Well, if you look at this, we can see that both of those equations are already solved for one of the variables. In this case, it's C. So we're just going to go ahead and set those equal to each other and be able to solve. So that's 12.50S equals 5.50S plus 1,400. Okay, so remember we got to get S on one side, our number on the other. So I'm going to subtract 550S on both sides. Okay, so 1250 minus 550 gives me 7S. That equals 1,400. I'm going to divide by 7 on each side. So the number of scarves I'm going to need to sell, or this fashion designer, is 200. So 200 scarves. Okay, well, how much is that amount to break even? So what we can do is find that amount by plugging these 200 scarves back in to that equation. So I've got $12.50 for 200 scarves equals the cost she's walking away with. So 12.50 times 200 gives me $2,500. Okay, so that's going to be her break-even point. She needs to sell at least 200 scarves, and that's going to be her break-even amount.